This episode of Will You Hire Me is a product manager interview with Matt, a product director with Arrival, ex-product with Facebook, and ex-BCG consultant. The candidate is an experienced product manager too, and yet he was not prepared for what happened during the interview. The key takeaway is to be ready to talk about your experience and product ideas in a concise and structured way. My name is Viktor Ogulenko, and you're watching FLAS. Let's go!
Good morning. Sorry for being late. I was late, just for our audience. Thank you for dialing into this so early your time. You're somewhere in the East Coast or in the West Coast? Whereabouts are you?
I'm in Toronto, so it's 7:20 right now.
New York-like time. I'm really sorry for that, and thank you for accommodating this. I'm based in London, so I'm in a way preferable position time-wise. It's around noon here. Let us do the following. So this is the mock interview. The legend that I asked our host to spread to all the candidates was that we are looking for a product manager or a senior product manager for the internal tooling position. So someone who'd be managing a team of software developers creating internal tools. The very generic high-level requirements were fluent English, great communication skills, good PRD writing skills, ruthless prioritization abilities, and some interest in the general topic of the in-house tooling. That was our legend. So what I would suggest we do is we start off with fairly informal introductions. I'm going to tell a tiny bit, like literally 2 minutes, about myself. And then please tell me about yourself. And then we're going to spend a little bit of time on talking about your bio, your motivations. Why is that you've got interested in this role, which I think is really important. And then we're also going to spend a little bit of time on the more typical product stuff, like a few of the high level, very classical product manager interview questions. And then towards the end, after about 40 to 45 minutes, we're going to wrap up with 5 to 10 minutes of feedback. Sounds good?
That's amazing.
Okay, coolio. Let's switch into the interview mode. I'm going to start off with a few minutes of intro. My name is Matt Vey. I'm a product director at Arrival. Arrival is a UK-based commercial electric vehicle firm aspiring to industrialize primarily vans, electric vans and electric coaches, but we also have a bunch of other less socialized products and projects. Before that, I worked as a product person for one of the Facebook ad products and as a founding product and engineer team member at a company called Samsara, which is a telematics IoT B2B SaaS company from the Valley. And before that, I'd worked for many years as a consultant for the Boston Consulting Group, primarily for the London office, but about 10 years ago or so, I worked for the Russian office as well. Whew, that's it. We're hiring for a senior PM for my team for the internal tooling, product group. Over to you. Could you tell me a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. So for the sake of interview, I think I have a extensive experience in product management and I've worked in various companies from small to big. So I think the most relevant experience for you would be an enterprise software I was building in BPM Online. So it's now called Creatio. I think it was a CRM software. It's actually right behind Salesforce in this Gartner Magic Quadrant, so which they're very proud of. And we were building the marketplace. We had different users, and some of the users were developers, basically, of the marketplace, right? So it's developers of the marketplace and the users of the marketplace. So I think my experience with developers and kind of internal processes and the way they use marketplace. They want to use marketplace and the way that they want to build applications for that marketplace would be the most relevant experience for this position.
Okay, since you've mentioned that, and apologies for interrupting you a little bit, could you talk a little bit more to that? I got the high level description of that Creatio is a company that's what builds a platform for marketplaces, but I didn't quite get it.
It's a CRM, which is a typical not sales CRM. I think it had multiple verticals. It's like Salesforce, basically. And they follow the footsteps of Salesforce because, as you may know, Salesforce had an app store, basically, on its own, which is very extensive. They have their own proprietary language. I don't remember what particular language it is based off, Java or JavaScript. Anyway, memory slips me. But they wanted to build pretty much the same thing, right? The value proposition of the marketplace, or the why they wanted to build a marketplace, is very similar to any other big enterprise companies who develop products, because with enterprise world, it's a lot. You have like very big clients with very custom requests, right? And you don't actually want to fulfill those requests, because otherwise you'll be a feature factory with very custom things, very custom features, like 1,000 features that are useful for some very big clients, but not useful for all of them. So they didn't want to go there. And as any other such businesses, they wanted to invest or build a marketplace where third-party developers could provide their solutions, paid solutions, of course. And the users of the marketplace, which is the clients of Creatio, could download them. In that case, they're achieving the goal of providing custom solutions to meet the very custom needs of big enterprises and not lose them, and also win sales, right? Because it was very important for them to make sure that they check all the boxes during the sales process, right? Because it's an active sales process. They have sales team. The sales cycle is like 1 year. So it was very important for them to be able to check the boxes that you have all the features that are requested by this enterprise or that enterprise.
Fair enough. Sorry if I can interrupt you for a second there, because we made quite a deep dive into your Creatio experience. Just a few follow-up questions on it, and then just to guide the interview a little bit, I wanted us to make a step back and to talk about others' experience of yours, because you do have quite a lot of them. So did I get it right that Creatio primarily was a CRM that was also aspiring to build some form of a marketplace for developers as like an extra value proposition to ideally compete with someone like Salesforce? As a very, very high level description, when I play it back to you, does it kind of make sense? Okay, what is that you did there? Like, what were your features? What was your team working on?
So when I joined, first of all, it was a very brief experience, because I relocated soon after and I had to leave this company, unfortunately, though it was very, very nice, by all means. But when I joined, they didn't have a notion of marketplace at all. They just had a CRM with an open, they wanted to open an API for that CRM. So it was proprietary, so it was closed API, and it wasn't possible to easily build anything on top of that. So they wanted to open their API for third-party developers, and they wanted to provide a marketplace, which is essentially a web app where you can go and log in. So you need to authorize with your Creatio. In that case, it was BPM Online under the old name credentials, and install the app onto your instance. And they had back then they had cloud instances, and then also they had I think standalone instances, but mostly it was for cloud based instances of CRM. So basically I was shaping the marketplace from the very beginning. So I was I was talking to the users. Yeah, I was the main the only product manager on the project.
Okay.
Yes. So I was talking to the developers, because we already had some interested developers, right? Who were also the users of Creatio. So because Creatio was used by many integrators, or how do they call it? Professional services, right? Who build software basically, and they wanted to improve the product, and they were interested in providing solutions to the marketplace. So I talked to them and was doing some user research on what they need in terms of tools and capabilities of the marketplace to successfully build and ship their solutions. And it's a very complex process, because it also involves payments, right? Because they obviously they're interested in selling these products on the marketplace. So we've I think we've shaped the MVP of that, which obviously had a lot of features crossed out, like payments, for example. We decided to do it manually through our financial department, just on our
Fair enough. So, sorry, if I can just stop you there, just again to gently guide, not that I'm not interested, I think that this is all fascinating, but just to bring us back a little bit and to make us step back and keep talking about your experience more holistically. I think I kind of understood what you did at Creatio. You did mention it yourself that it was a brief stint, and you left it after what, half a year or so. I guess the very natural question is, why did you? If it sounds like it sounds like it was an interesting product and you're enjoying it yourself there. Why did you leave so quickly?
Because I relocated to another country and another continent, actually. So, and they didn't provide remote opportunities back then, unfortunately. So that's the only reason.
Do you mind me asking why did you relocate?
Oh, that's a life question. There are multitude of reasons why I relocated. Always wanted to relocate, but if you run a query, if you imagine countries as a data set, right? When you run a query and want to select a country that is English-speaking, developed, also actively attracting immigrants, there are very few countries that will pop up in your list. So I would say it's one or two.
So you moved to Canada. Where was Creatio?
In Ukraine. They are headquartered in Boston, but it's mostly sales office, and they're, as far as I remember, maybe they changed. But back then it was Ukraine. They had multiple offices, but I was working in Ukrainian one in Kyiv.
Okay, makes sense. So just looking at your resume, whilst you moved to Canada, you spent, again, half a year, a relatively short stint at Creatio, which is a cryptocurrency startup. And then after half a year, you moved yet to a different gig, which was TribalScale. Do you mind speaking a little bit to that move? Because you've achieved your goal of moving to Canada, and then you jumped the ship again. What happened there?
So cryptocurrency startup, it was a very interesting gig in general, and short-lived by definition, I think. Because it was a startup, it had multiple other issues that I really can't disclose, unfortunately, because I think this is a public video, right? So, but yeah, they withdrew their operations from Canada, not related to the product or the team. With TribalScale, it was an interesting experience of mine, because I've never worked in a consultancy, and TribalScale is a consultancy, right? So it builds custom software for their clients. And it was an interesting experience for the product manager, because you think of a consultancy as a primarily focusing on delivery, right? So you don't control their inception. You don't control the ideas, basically, because the clients come to you with the ideas already. They just want these ideas to be implemented. And you help them, of course, to shape those ideas, trying to dig deeper into what their problems they're trying to address with this application they want to build. But eventually it's their decision. So you, as a product manager in a consultancy, don't have control over critical decisions that affect the product. And also when you ship the product, that's it. So that's usually when the product management job starts. And this is where the product manager's job in consultancy ends, when you ship the product. So, which is very interesting. But yeah, it was an interesting experience, and I decided that maybe I'm better off not in the consultancy, but back in product development, that's where I joined my current place. And I'm really happy here. But for the sake of the interview, right, I cannot say that I'm super happy. I don't plan to move, but yeah, anyway, so that's...
Fair enough. Just to wrap it up, why did you move from the PM role into a more consulting role and then back? It seems to me you're finding the core PM job is the most enjoyable bit, then you still temporarily switched to this consulting gig. Why?
It was interesting. They had a variety of clients, right, which were very big Fortune 500 companies. And I also didn't have that much experience in mobile space, and they were building mobile apps quite extensively. It's majority of their applications were mobile. So I decided it would be a good experience for me to practice delivery in a sphere where I wasn't really good, which is mobile apps. And so it was very interesting. We've shipped a bunch of apps and app updates. I think it was a great experience. I learned a lot, and I really, really polished my delivery skills. Also, as a product manager, of course, it depends on the layout or particular structure of your organization, right? Some have project managers, some have business analysts, some have all sorts of analysts and helpers But in a like pure product management sense, product manager is responsible for everything end to end. You don't usually sometimes you find yourself in a place where you control the delivery, and you need to be really, so delivery is a very technical process. It doesn't really involve a lot of like deep thinking. It's very straightforward. You just have a goal and you need to deliver within a time frame or the budget, for example, constraints or resources constraints, and you of course need to control dependencies and all the other things, but purely it's mostly like, to me it's purely technical, and it doesn't mean it's easy by any means, but it means that you need to be really good at it. So you're thinking about it. So I was thinking, in consultancy I can really excel at this and really polish my skills on in product delivery, which I did, and I'm really grateful for that. So it was really cool. Okay, so in that case, I don't think about delivery right now. When I'm thinking about products, I'm thinking about like ideas basically, and how to shape them, rather than how we can deliver. Delivery is a matter of time.
Okay, fair enough. Makes sense. So we've got a good overview of what you've been doing and why. We kind of gradually built up our way and got to your current position. Could you tell me a little bit about what is your experience of writing PRDs and prioritizing the roadmap, generally speaking? What's it been at Joyce specifically? If you could give an overview to, well, first, to what extent have you been involved in either writing PRDs yourself or coaching other people in terms of writing PRDs? That'd be awesome. And then equally, if you could give me a little bit of a voiceover to what's been your approach to prioritizing roadmap, as in how did you do that? I'd appreciate that as well.
I think PRDs is just a step in the process of product development. So and it depends on all other steps that precedes writing the PRDs and like influences the PRD itself. The prioritization also stems from the process rather than just like a pure prioritization of your subject opinion. I would say that everything starts with a goal. So the company should have a vision, right? Where it wants to write what's the ideal state of the company, where they want to achieve at a certain time. Maybe never, but that's a vision for them that they never achieve, but they strive for that. So, and they should have a strategy. Strategy is how they get to this vision. You think about vision as a let's say you're driving your car and the vision is your end destination, right? What is your final destination? It's like, let's say it's London and you are driving from Moscow, and the strategy is like, hey, how you get there? You get there through, I don't know, Germany or through Italy, or like maybe, I don't know, you do 5 steps on the way, or you just drive non-stop. That strategy is developed, of course, by like executive team, like chief product officer or like VP of product, in combination with CEO and all the executive team, basically, as I said. Then, based on that strategy, you decide the priorities for the year, because strategy is also, it's time-based, right? So what is the step one? Step one, we get here this year. Next year, we get there. Year 3, we get here. So you clearly describe the steps, how you achieve that vision that you want to get to. That's all starts from there, right? So you have a clear goal for the year. And the goal could be business metrics, and usually it is, right? Like, hey, we need to achieve 100,000 monthly active users by the end of this year, and now we have 1,000. How we get there? And that's where the most interesting part starts, and that's where I think the tactical product management starts. You take this goal, and depending on the framework you use in the company, it could be quarterly objectives, OKR system, or something else. Let's say you're using OKR system that I'm mostly familiar with. So you just slice this objective into quarters, and you have a quarterly objective. Let's say, okay, you have 100,000 users for a year. It means that you have 25,000 users for as an objective for Q1. And you come to the team and say, hey team, we need to achieve 25,000 monthly active users, like this quarter. And the team, which consists of designers, developers, maybe user researchers, it's a cross-functional product team that owns that objective. I like think about this objective and ideate how to achieve that goal for the quarter. So what about PRD? Where does PRD kicks in? PRD describes the objective to the team, and the goal of PRD is not to write the requirements. Hey, the product should look like this. The button should be here. The button should be there, and the color should be this. No, it should describe. Hey, we have the goal of achieving this business objective, and we need to, as a product manager, you need to provide insights. You need to shape this objective. So you need to provide insights. Usually there are two types of insights, qualitative and quantitative. So if you look at the PRD structure or good PRD structure, you have objective, then you have insights, qualitative insights, quantitative insights. Quantitative insights is like, okay, talking about this example of monthly active users. So let's say this is the funnel of the user journey that we have, and this is where the users drop off. This is where they churn. So maybe the insight would be this step or this part of the app is causing the most churn for the users. So maybe fixing that will give us a 90% retention. And if we have 90% retention with the current acquisition, we will get to the 25,000 users by the end of the quarter, as an example, right? So this would be a quantitative insight, which is a result of like product analytics that usually is done by product manager or product analyst, depending on the team. Then you have qualitative insights. Like, let's say for this specific example, you are talking to the users, and you need to, as a product manager, you need to do this job before, obviously, before you present it to the team and before the quarter starts, usually. And you are talking to the users, doing user research, asking them questions why, because data will not show you why the users, for example, are not using the app on a monthly basis and they're churning, why maybe they found an alternative, or maybe they're frustrated with something in the app, or maybe they didn't find value in the app and there is a job that's very important for them and it's table stakes, right? And they don't see it in the app. So you provide that insights from the user research as well in the PRD, and then you have solutioning. So solution is usually open.
Can I stop you there? Just a mild interjection. I think that you have given a very nice, more conceptual or theoretical overview of like what is a PRD and how it should be structured, or how could, at the very high level, the prioritization process be structured. I guess what interests me more and what I initially asked for is, at Joist, what's been your experience specifically there of both prioritization and writing out the PRDs? So let's just kind of try and make a step back and speak about the PRDs. You started off as a senior product manager, then you were promoted to being a director. Could you speak a little bit to what extent have you been writing or coaching others to write PRDs in both of those roles?
Understood. Yeah, so I was writing PRDs, as I said, because you cannot have an objective without a description for this objective, and then when you have an objective for the quarter, you're slicing it to their like larger chunks. I was getting there. So like solutions basically are ideas from the team that you want to, that they think will achieve that objective, right? So you have this list of ideas basically, and then you need to dive deeper into each idea. So let's say the example I provide, this is exactly what I was doing at Joist. I know this is theoretical, but we try to like have to follow the good practices of product management here. So basically, you have a list of ideas to the problem that you've shaped, right, for the quarter, and then you do a research on each of those ideas. Actually, before you do research, you prioritize them. How do you prioritize them? You can use multiple different things. We use very simple prioritization technique, which is effort impact. So you assign their high level impact score from 1 to 3, and the high level effort score. Usually you don't assign it the effort, of course, it's technical lead, and it's of course it's arbitrary, but I think prioritization is in general a very arbitrary process. So then you have effort impacts for each of those ideas, and then you calculate the prioritization score, which is when you multiply effort and impact, you have it. And then basically you have your top ideas based on that very simple prioritization thing. Of course, you as a product manager, you might have a decision based on your intuition. You think this idea, although it's very high effort and maybe high impact, you still want to do that as a strategic decision. It's up to you, because prioritization is not it's not dictating you what to do. It's a good tip for a product manager to think of, like, what is the weight of these ideas, and then you pick the shortlist the ideas, top 3 ideas, and you extensively research them. Each idea should have its own PRD, so which states the problem that idea is trying to solve and states the solution. For example, in my case, and this is not a theoretical case, for monthly active users, we identified that we want to fix that specific funnel step, right? That leads to churn. Yeah, that's about it. What happens at the funnel step? This is where the users interact with this particular part of the app, that once, twice, and then they churn from this feature, and they churn from the product. That's where we identified the major problem is. So we're trying to fix that feature. In that case, we're talking to the users again, who used the feature and who churned, for example, asking why they did it, what feature is trying to solve for them. Maybe the feature wasn't built correctly. Okay. It doesn't cover their needs. So in that case, we again ideate on how we should update this feature. You frame in this PRD, you frame the problem the feature represents, and provide insights, quantitative, qualitative. Quantitative insights for the feature, usage of the feature, repeat usage of the feature, any maybe surveys that you've done about this feature, and satisfaction rates, for example, NPS results. Qualitative insights, the results of the interviews, and then you sit down and decide, okay, you know what, we actually ship this feature as an MVP. We should iterate on that. It doesn't really cover, if you think about user journey, it doesn't cover, let's say it's a feature that allows you to capture photos in the app. It doesn't allow you to feel the need of the user fully. So, for example, you can take photos, but you cannot reorder them. And the users are really frustrated by it, because on a typical document they have, like, let's say 15 photos, and it's really frustrating for them to not being able to reorder them. It's a very simple example, also based on real life. That's a very simple fix. So we're doing it and seeing the results. So PRD, as I said, just shapes this whole thing. And you as a product manager, you deal with PRDs all the time. So I write them weekly. If you ask how often, how many PRDs do I write? It's every feature, not feature, but every key result, every solution, every idea that you pick, it should have PRD. Because otherwise, how would you frame it? There's no other way.
Fair enough. I think that we're about 25 to 30 minutes in. We've done a very nice overview of your background. We've spoken a little bit about PRD and prioritization experience. Let's try and do 2 quick classical product sense questions, and then wrap it up and switch over into kind of the feedback mode. As the first very open-ended question that I wanted to ask, and please don't approach it in a too detailed of a manner here, just because of the time constraints. I'm looking for something that would be very sensible, but still high level. And the question is, if you could pick any app or a service, something that you know well, something that I might have used as well, something popular, and suggest a few of the ideas of how you think this kind of service could have been improved or could be improved, that'd be awesome. You could take a little bit of time to think about what kind of service or an app you'd go for. But yeah, pick an app or a service, something that I would know, and propose a few of the ideas on how it could be improved.
So is it important that you should know that?
Yes, otherwise I wouldn't understand the context. So it's better be something famous that likely all of us use.
That's a good call, because I have an example for that. Obviously, but it's not a very famous app, and I really doubt you would use it. It's not a B2C app; it's a B2B app, and I used it as a business. So interesting. Okay, let me think.
One of the things that I am sometimes proposing in this kind of situations to the candidates is just check out your phone, take your phone, look at the apps that you have there. Very likely, so there's one that is popular, that you're using on a daily basis, but that pisses you off for one reason or another.
I don't use that. when it really frustrates me, I'm very typical user. I churn right immediately and find another app. So the problem with that is that I don't have a phone right in my hands, because it's in the recording mode, right? Unfortunately, I can.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry about that.
So just give me a sec, because it's very early in the morning.
Okay. Sure.
because all the apps I use and I love, I don't like, they're amazing. For example, Google Maps, literally nothing to add there. Amazing app from my standpoint, fulfills all my needs. The banking app I have, it's very like for Canadian standard, by Canadian standards, it's a good banking app. Spotify. How would I improve Spotify? Better recommendation? Yeah, probably. I think that's very simple and really not really deep example.
I think that's a good enough example. Why do you think that the recommendations are bad, and how exactly would you improve them? How do you make sure that they're better?
I think the music you're listening to, it depends on the context, right? So whether you are running, or let's say you are in a car driving, or maybe you're sitting at home reading a book and you want to have an ambient music. So it's the context is really important for the music. Actually, it dictates the music. Like as I see, like myself, the context dictates the music I listen to. I will not listen to like upbeat trance when I'm reading a book. Maybe that's just me, but this is my personal preferences, right? So and Spotify knows actually what the context is. It has all the clues. For example, when you are driving, the Spotify is connected to the car, so it knows, hey, I'm connected to that. How is it called for the Apple? I don't remember. Or for the Android Auto, right? This is the driving mode. It actually suggests, do you want to enter the driving mode? So why wouldn't you use that context to slightly change the recommendations? Because you can see the history of it already does. Like the recommendation engine of Spotify is based on your previous songs that you've listened to, right? Why don't you account for one more factor, which is context? Oh, in the car, this user listened mostly to Madonna. Let's put it as a factor in recommending the songs to the user. Or maybe you're running and Spotify can track that. I'm not sure if you have permissions or if you ask. I think it asks you permissions, so you can potentially track that the user is moving with that speed that potentially he or she is running, and provide like a better recommendations for that specific instance. Or maybe you're at home, which also can be controlled, can identify that you are like stationary, right? The phone isn't moving, or you may be connected to the Wi-Fi, most commonly used. And then you're like, hey, this user is at home, let's provide him like ambient music or more like calm music, for example.
I think that I kind of understand the spirit of your idea, which is Spotify potentially has some signals to try and infer what your context is, whether you're driving, whether you're trying to work out, whether you're running, whether you're at home, la-di-da-di-da. How exactly would you use those signals to improve their playlist? Walk me through what the feature improvement could be there.
So first of all, I would, this is the idea, right? This is my assumptions. I would just, let's say the problem is researched. So we talk to the users, this is a real problem. This is a real need. They're frustrated that Spotify is suggesting them irrelevant music. So they're in the car and Spotify recommends them like very calm music, for example. It's not really relevant for the environment. And let's say this is a valid problem. You validated it through user research, and you're in the solution space. I usually am not the source of ideas, or the main source of ideas. I leave it to the team, and I try to shape the problem, so their ideas are generated from all potential sources, which includes designers, developers. Developers usually have the best ideas, but let's say the idea is okay. We picked this factor, let's say we have identified 4 major environments through user research and through data analysis that the users are in: exercising, driving, at home, and let's say at work. And we've identified them, and then we'll tag every listening session with this environment. So basically, you'll start tagging all the songs. So you'll have all the sessions, because what Spotify does, it records a session. Hey, user, listen to this song for 1 minute at this time. This is a record in database. So you just tag it. It was at home. It was at work. It was during exercise. How does it do that? You need to build it in the app. The app needs to tell what the environment, or the best guess of the app. And then you collect this data, and over, let's say, a month, and see backwards in the data. I would pick a test group of users. And Spotify is very great at A/B testing, right? They have this very famous Spotify engineering culture, which I'm pretty sure you're aware of. They ship things half done and they hide it behind feature flags. So let's ship this feature for a subset of users in UK. Let's say how many users do we need to achieve statistical significance? Let's say 1,000 or 10,000 users. And although we can collect data for all, right? Then about the context, what we'll do for these 10,000 users, we'll prompt them with, hey, try to improve your search. Enable context-based recommendations or environment-based recommendations. Context-based, I think, is a better word. But I leave it to marketing team. And then, they enable it. And then in the very end of the experiment, let's say the experiment runs for this group like 2 weeks or a month. You have the control group, you have their variable group, right? Variant group. And then you see, okay, control group versus variant group. What is their churn? I'm not sure what are the churn. I think Spotify is a bad example.
Before you go on with the description of the A/B test, could you speak a little bit more to how does the feature actually manifest? So you've spoken a little bit to how you'd collect the data. So you said that you're going to come up with some form of a tagging where for a few months you're going to start tagging what people listen with your idea of what environment they may be in. How would you use this? How would the feature actually manifest? How would it work?
So you are prompted as I see it, right? And I would leave it to the design, because as a product manager, I just have this goal. I need the user to know to enable their context-based recommendation. How, from usability standpoint, this is, I think, a design question or UX question. If I would design it, I would prompt the user. It's a setting, right? You just enable it or disable. The setting would be called context-based recommendations. It's very similar to what Spotify does when you are driving. It recommends a new interface, like a different UI for the driving mode. It says, hey, you're driving. Do you want to switch to the driving mode? Could be very similar, like, hey, it seems like you're running. Do you want to switch to context-based recommendations? Or it could be not connected to the context in general. Hey, we improved our recommendations engine. Do we want to try a new context-based recommendations? And if they click yes, they see a toggle in the settings. They press on the toggle, it's on. That's where the experience starts, right? And so in the very end, we can measure the satisfaction rate of this group. We can measure many metrics: satisfaction rate, churn, or retention. I'm not sure what are the numbers, and if the period of a month is big enough to measure that. It depends on Spotify KPIs. I'm not sure, but you can look at different metrics and see if the experiment was successful, if the feature was successful, and if it was actually solving the problem, which is the problem again is irrelevant recommendations on Spotify that we assumingly validated.
Fair enough. Okay then. Thank you for this answer. I see that we're probably around 40 minutes in, and we're aiming at 40 to 45 minutes for the interview. I suggest that we wrap it up, take off our hats of interviewer and interviewee, or at least you take off your hat of an interviewee, and we switch a little bit into the feedback mode. Don't mind?
Sure, definitely.
All right.
Coolio. I'm going to be peeping occasionally into my iPad. I wasn't typing random stuff, I was typing up the notes. Again, thank you so much for doing this interview. I especially appreciated that your time, it's ridiculously early. Was it 7 a.m. in the morning? I wouldn't have done it. So kudos to you for that. I think that's kind of a huge caveat to look at and to consider whilst listening to the feedback. There's usually a few of the dimensions that I try to give a mark people. I try to give a mark on to people during the PM interviews. I do give quite a huge weight to motivation, generally speaking. Why is that they're looking for a new role? Why is that they're looking to leave their current company? Why our particular company? Which in this case was a little bit of a theoretical consideration, but it overlapped a little bit with your bio. So that one, that dimension was somewhat replaced with existence or absence of any other red flags in the bio. So I usually rank motivation, any red flags in the bio, communication skills, generally speaking, product experience, and product sense. So the last bit that we've done. So let us go a little bit through each one of those sections. Motivation, we kind of covered. It's a very theoretical setup. It's a made-up job, made-up company. So we can disregard that one. When it comes to communication skills, which is a little bit overlapping with the red flags in the bio, what I'd say was that you do have decent communication skills, but when it comes to structure, it wasn't as top-down as I would have preferred. I can give you a few of the examples. So, for example, when I asked you about why did you move or why did you switch jobs so quickly after Creatio, you gave a fairly long-winded answer. Whilst ideally, what I probably would have been looking for is something along the lines of, my job was based in Ukraine. I wanted to move to a different, better country, or to a country of my liking, and that's why it happened. Whilst instead of that, you started talking about the process for selecting the good countries, and that you ended up with Canada in this process.
Why you picked Canada? You said, like, why did you move? And this is how I replied, right? And I think it's very sorry for continue with feedback. Maybe sorry for me interrupting you. Maybe not adding to the communication skills in the very end.
I mean, I'd say that generally speaking, it was sadly, there's a few of the examples where your answers were very much not top down. So there's another one. So when I asked you about what is that you did at Creatio, you started talking about how they had an API, how they wanted to provide a marketplace, how they had cloud instances versus on-premise instances. And then only a few minutes into the answer, you said the key phrase I was looking for, which was, I was a product manager for marketplace, which in the context of the question of what is that you did at Creatio, I would expect the whole answer to start with something like this, as a PM for that feature, as a PM for some other feature. There's a few of the examples of the very much not top-down communication in the whole rundown of the bio thingy, which did put me off a little bit. I think a more patient interviewer would have followed through with all of that. A less patient one probably would have just given you, well, a downward or a lower point on the communication section of the interview. Now, let's switch over to the next bit, which is the product experience. I think based on how we walked through your biography, you should have at this point an amazing product experience. If anything, because you worked in an ICPM capacity for a very long time, for several years. You worked for several different firms in several different industries, cryptocurrencies, your current service, CRM before that. So you surely must have a great experience. However, and I think that ties back a little bit into the communication piece. When I asked you about what's been your specific experience of writing the PRDs and what's been your specific experience of prioritizing the features at your current company, you gave me, again, a fairly long-winded answer that listened and kind of sounded a bit more like a theoretical approach. What is a PRD? What is a prioritization process? And I tried stopping you a few times and asking you, Alex, you're giving me a fairly theoretical answer. Could you speak to me to what's been your specific experience? And weirdly enough, the next sentence you said was that, oh, you know what? I know that what I'm about to tell you is fairly theoretical, but let me tell you about this. And then you kept on going about like how the PRD should be structured or how the prioritization process should be structured. Whilst I guess what I was looking for, and you started getting to this after a few of the, let me stop you, please tell me about your specific experience. What I was more looking for is things like, oh, when I was in ICPM, when I started at my current company, I wrote a PRD for that feature, and that feature. And then when I became a director, I got 3 PMs that were pertinent to me, and I started coaching them in this manner on how they wrote their PRDs.
I see. That makes sense. I agree with your feedback. Thanks for providing this. Yeah, that totally makes sense. It's just I wasn't. I think my expectations from this interview was different because I'm not comfortable talking about my experience publicly because we're in a public company. And I'm not experienced. I'm not comfortable talking publicly about my experience in general, because I think it's a very NDA kind of and like very very subtle matter if you do it publicly. And if you want to go into specifics, you can't. I think I should have disclosed it in the very beginning. I can't go to specifics. I'm really not there.
I think it's a fair comment. I take it, I accept it. I think generally speaking, the useful thing to mention here is that you could get into a similar situation of needing to speak and needing to describe your experiences that either feel very precious about in the most good way, or that are under the direct NDA. You might get into this situation not even in the context of like a mock interview that might be uploaded to the internet, but in the context of the real interview as well. That's a very real problem. You're going to have exactly the same problem in a private interview if the work that you've been doing under the NDA. And I guess what I'm trying to lead to is that I've seen people handle this very differently in the context of the real interview. For example, we've had a few of the applicants from Apple, which is famous, which is infamous for how secretive it is when it comes to its PM work. And the thing that the person told me, the candidate told me from the get-go was that interview me, but everything is under NDA, so I'm not going to share any specifics with you. Now, with this kind of approach, the interviewee instantly puts me in a very difficult position. I'm unable to judge them, and in a world when there's a lot of applicants, I will likely reject this person. So I think that there's
same. I would do the same. Exactly. So I think the only difference here is that it is not publicly uploaded to the internet. Mm-hmm. And this is the major factor. If you think about it, I really can't speak publicly, just openly to everyone, on the record. This is important about these things.
Fair enough.
In a regular interview process, your questions are very typical for an interview, and I've heard them multiple times. I'm doing interviews myself. I'm hiring for PMs. We actually are hiring for senior PM right now, if you're listening and interested. So, and I ask the same questions, and I would expect the same things as you did. It's just from my expectations, as I said, from this session was not hey, we will not go into the experience, which is it's just go into the experience. It's not that fun, I think. And it's very dependent on your resume, but rather go into product cases and solve the product cases with different trying to do that. Okay. I actually prepared for that, and I have the drawing board and but anyway.
Oh gosh.
So
sorry,
I had wrong expectations, and I wasn't ready to talk about my experience at all. I would say. So I'm not comfortable doing that on the internet. Sorry, users, or sorry, listeners. I'm just not. Yeah, sorry for that.
I think it's a valid comment. And just to wrap up the experience topic, I think that there's a few of the extremes just to make it useful for the listeners as well. There's the extreme of a not so made up case of someone from Apple who interviewed with us not so long ago, who just killed himself from the very outset by saying, even in the private interview, that he's not going to share anything about his experience. There's another extreme of, we had another candidate, a person who worked for the British Ministry of Defense, which I would imagine is probably even a more secretive organization than Apple. And that person somehow found a way to talk to us about their experiences without disclosing any of the sensitive data. And they found a way to find this balance. So I think that my message to the listeners out there would be, think about this carefully. Just to switch over to the short bit that we've had about the made up case where you spoke about Spotify and how you'd improve it. This is the bit where I think there also might be a few points of the constructive feedback out there. So you're doing those interviews a lot yourself. And I think that this clean slate kind of question about give me an app and how you'd improve it is one of the more standard ones. So although for politeness sake, you usually would hear things like, you know what, no rush, take your time, think about it. In reality, I would probably expect a candidate to have an app to talk to top of their mind. So we had a little bit of a hiccup there. You landed with Spotify, and I think that you came up fairly quickly with a reasonable area to tackle, which is let's kind of try and tackle their recommendations and make them better. I think you had this very good idea of that Spotify likely can infer the context of where you are, based on what devices you connect to or the speed of your movement. The thing that I struggled a little bit with is an actual description of the feature. Now, what you kept repeating when I kind of try to ask the prompt question of like, but what is the actual feature is, gosh, what was the...
I left it to the designers to solve.
Yeah, so first of all, you were deferring a lot to like designers and like other idea generators. And then instead of the actual description of the feature, which I was looking for, I was explicitly asking you for it, you kept saying something like it's going to be the context-based recommendations. Now, I think that you made the right first step in terms of saying that you're going to collect the data based on like your assumptions about the context. Now, the next step that I probably was looking for was something along the lines of, and then based on the context, so every time, the next time we'll see that someone is in the car or someone is at home or someone is working out, we're going to show an extra panel saying context-based recommendation, a context-based playlist for when you're in the car. A playlist, like we're going to show a
Which is not the feature that I thought about. I thought about as a setting. And that's it. It's not a prompt every time you are in the context, because otherwise it would be very annoying. But it's me. It's not the feature I thought of. Like it's not the solution I thought of. But it could be a good one. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that you've understood me that.
So that's the thing. I didn't understand the last step. I didn't understand the actual description of the setting. I didn't understand what is going to happen or what should have happened the time you switch on this toggle of context-based recommendations. So that's kind of the bit that I was missing. I'd say that, just to wrap it up, I hope that this was useful for the listeners in the sense of that despite that we had this hiccup in the form of that you weren't comfortable with speaking to the specifics of your experience. I think we gave people, hopefully, an idea of some of the pitfalls that people might get into when they're talking about their experiences, generally speaking, especially when it pertains to the expectation of the top-down answers rather than bottom-up. And I think that when it comes to the question or any questions about the feature design, the expectation would probably also be to get to the actual description of the feature and to the point a bit quicker. Having said this, I mean, dude, we're at the same level. You're a product director. You're doing those interviews all the time. You have a very respectable experience of having worked as both a consultant and the IC product manager and the product manager. So not to downplay that, I really appreciate you joining this and sharing all of those experiences and putting you on the spot in this sense.
No worries. I apologize for that. I had wrong expectations, and it was a bummer, right? Because I don't think I provided the value their users or their listeners, the users of this interview are looking for. And yeah, unfortunately, I just didn't expect that. Just purely talk about experience, which makes sense, and it's a valid step in the interview process. I do it a lot. It just for like not really like what I was expecting. And what I'm comfortable of talking about. Anyway, I appreciate you providing this feedback. This is very constructive and very detailed feedback.
Thank you for bearing with me and listening through all of that. And again, thank you so much for joining this so early on your time.
That's it. If you found the video useful, please like it, subscribe, share with your friends, or just say something nice in the comments. And if you want to become a participant of a future episode, just send your CV to YouTube at flexibilita.pro under the subject "Will you hire me, candidate?" Thanks for watching, and until next time, cheers!